I want you to picture something. In 2008, one of the world's top military bioweapons experts, I mean, a guy who spent his entire life working in highly secure laboratories.
Right, the highest clearance.
Exactly. He had access to the most lethal, fast-acting microscopic pathogens on the planet. And this man, he decides to take his own life.
Which is tragic on its own, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. But get this. The method he chose, an over-the-counter bottle of Tylenol.
Wow. Yeah, that really stands out.
Right. I mean, think about the last time you saw something at work that just, didn't add up. Like a number on a spreadsheet that completely defies basic logic.
Or like a piece of software that's doing something its own programming shouldn't even allow.
Yes, exactly. Now, imagine that spreadsheet was actually an FBI murder investigation.
Okay, the stakes are a bit higher there.
Just a bit. And that glaring anomaly, that impossible software glitch, was a highly educated scientist choosing a statistically improbable, agonizingly slow method of suicide.
It's the kind of detail that makes you stop in your tracks.
It really is. And today we're doing a deep dive into how that single jarring impossibility led a German doctor to allegedly predict the COVID-19 pandemic.
And predicted an entire year before the virus ever made headlines, which is wild.
It's completely wild. So let's unpack this. We have a lot of ground to cover.
We do. And to answer how we get from a Tylenol overdose in 2008 to a global pandemic in 2020, we have to navigate a really specific, intricate, and honestly highly controversial worldview.
Yeah, we are pulling from some very intense source material today.
Right. We're looking at an extensive interview broadcast on a YouTube channel called Lighthouse TV.
Hosted by Laurie Anderson, right?
Exactly. And she's speaking with Dr. Heiko Schöning. He's a German medical doctor, but he also has this extensive military background.
Which is key to all of this.
It really is. And across this interview, he lays out these grand-scale claims. We're talking allegations of pre-planned pandemics, state-sponsored bioweapons, and global organized crime.
Heavy stuff. Which means we need to set some ground rules right now.
Yes, absolutely critical. Before we go one step further, we must establish the parameters of this deep dive for you, the listener.
Right, because this material contains sweeping conspiracy claims.
And highly politically charged content. Things involving global elite coordination, intentional suppression, the works.
So we are taking absolutely no sides here. Zero.
None. Our mission today is strictly analytical. We are here to map out the architecture of Dr. Schöning's argument.
We're just impartially reporting on the narrative he presents in this interview.
Exactly. We're exploring the how and the why of his worldview, but we are not endorsing or validating his claims as absolute truth. We are just looking at the source.
Perfect. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's start with the architect of this theory.
Because you really can't separate the claims from the man making them, can you?
No, you can't. And according to the interview, Dr. Heiko Schöning is not just some guy who stumbled down an internet rabbit hole.
Right. He has a resume that, honestly, it reads like a geopolitical thriller.
It really does. So he grew up in West Germany near the Baltic Sea in a place called Lübeck.
And, growing up in West Germany during the Cold War, that is a foundational piece of context.
Yeah. Explain that a bit. Why is that so important?
Well, the Iron Curtain wasn't just some metaphor, right? It was a physical, highly militarized border that completely defined everyday reality.
It was right there.
Exactly. If you grow up in that environment, the tension of state power, of espionage, massive military presence, that's just the background radiation of your childhood.
You absorb it.
You do. You understand from a very young age that massive invisible forces like governments, intelligence agencies, military blocs, they are actively shaping the world.
And operating in total secrecy most of the time.
Right. And he didn't just passively absorb that environment as a kid, he actively entered the machinery of it as an adult.
Yeah, so he spent 3 years in the military, and this wasn't just any 3 years.
No, it was during one of the most complex logistical events of the 20th century, the reunification of Germany.
Right. So he describes his role as helping to merge two formerly enemy armies.
The Western and the East German armies. Just think about the scale of that.
It's mind-boggling. And they didn't just combine them into one massive force. He notes that they successfully reduced the total force by 2/3.
2/3. And this introduces a really crucial mental model for understanding his later claims.
What do you mean by mental model?
Systems thinking. Because merging two opposing armies, it isn't just about moving soldiers around on a map.
No, you have to deal with the whole bureaucracy.
Exactly. You are dismantling the bureaucratic, the logistical, the command structures of a massive state apparatus.
You're getting into the plumbing of this state.
Yeah, you're looking at the very nervous system of institutional power. You know, how pensions are paid, how weapon stockpiles are secured.
Who reports to who? The chain of command.
Right. And a person who participates in that process, they develop a very distinct practical understanding of how large-scale institutions operate.
They see the gears turning beneath the surface.
Exactly. They understand institutional inertia. They know how the sausage is made, basically.
Okay, so he has this intense exposure to state logistics.
Hmm.
And then he just pivots entirely.
Complete career change. He goes to medical school in Berlin.
But, he doesn't just open a quiet little family practice in the suburbs.
No, he goes straight into accident and emergency. A&E.
The ER.
The ER. And he practices on 3 different continents.
Which is another wild detail. Leicester Royal Infirmary in England.
The Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney, Australia.
And various hospitals in Germany. So he's seeing a lot of action globally.
And A&E is like the ultimate crucible for pattern recognition.
How so?
Well, in an emergency room, a doctor is just bombarded with chaotic, bloody, confusing information.
Is nonstop.
It is. And they have to instantly parse out the signal-to-noise ratio.
Figuring out what's actually killing the patient versus what's just a distraction.
Exactly. They must differentiate between what is immediately lethal and what requires intervention right this very second.
It's pure triage.
It's pure empirical evidence. What is physically presenting in front of you rather than, relying on theoretical models.
Right, because an academic virologist might spend years studying theoretical mutation rates in a sterile lab.
But an A&E doctor, they are trained to react to the visceral human reality crashing through those double doors.
It's a totally different mindset. And he also makes it a point in the interview to describe himself as 100% independent.
Yes, he really emphasizes that. And he highlights 2 of his hobbies. He's a competitive chess player and a rower.
Okay, let's unpack this. Bringing all of this background together, the Cold War, the military logistics, the global A&E experience, the chess...
It's a very specific lens.
Right. It seems Schöning is essentially applying a specific method of reverse engineering to global events.
Yeah, he is combining the strategic, adversary-focused, multi-step planning of a chess tactician.
Always thinking 3 moves ahead.
Exactly. He combines that with the high-stakes empirical triage of an ER doctor.
So he is looking at the world as a game board.
He is. He's searching for the opponent's signature. When he examines a global health crisis, he isn't looking at it through the lens of epidemiology.
Or natural mutation.
No. He is looking for human maneuvers. He's looking for logistical coordination and motive.
And the specific catalyst that causes him to point this highly specialized lens at the global stage.
It stems directly from his time in the emergency room.
Specifically, his experience treating suicide attempts.
Right. Which brings us to the inciting incident of this entire narrative.
Okay, let's rewind the clock. We're going back to September 2001.
A very dark time. The immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center.
The globe was in a state of shock. But running parallel to that trauma, there was a secondary, highly localized terror happening.
The anthrax letters.
Right. Letters filled with this white powder were sent to U.S. senators and major media outlets.
It essentially paralyzed the American mail system. People were terrified to open their own post.
Because the biological reality of anthrax is just horrifying.
It is. That's why it was such an effective tool for mass panic.
What does it actually do?
Well, Bacillus anthracospores, when they are inhaled, they bypass the body's initial defenses.
Hey, they get right into the lungs.
And they multiply rapidly. They release toxins that cause internal bleeding, swelling, and just massive tissue decay.
Wow.
The fatality rate for inhalation anthrax without immediate treatment is extraordinarily high.
So in 2001, this wasn't just a scare tactic. It was lethal.
Yes. Innocent people were killed, including a grandmother whose mail was simply cross-contaminated in the postal system.
Just terrible. And given the proximity to 9/11, the immediate visceral assumption by everyone, the public, the media...
was that this was a secondary wave of a foreign bioweapon attack.
Of course, that's what everyone thought. But then the narrative of a foreign attack fractures.
It completely breaks down. According to Schöning's account of the investigation, the FBI eventually traced the specific bacteria used in the letters.
It was known as the Ames strain, right?
Yes, the Ames strain. And the Ames strain didn't come from a cave overseas.
Where did it come from?
It originated directly from a U.S. Army bioweapons facility.
Wait, really?
Yes. Finding the Ames strain in those letters is equivalent to finding a highly classified military serial number on a bullet used in a civilian murder.
It shifts the entire paradigm of the investigation.
Completely. The threat is no longer an external enemy. It points inward.
Towards domestic source.
With access to heavily guarded, state-controlled biological assets.
So what did the FBI do?
Well, according to the interview, the FBI spent years desperately trying to pin this on a single perpetrator.
A lone wolf.
Right, some lone wolf who somehow bypassed all the intense security protocols of a military lab.
Which sounds incredibly difficult.
Very. They initially spent 5 years targeting a man named Stephen Hatfill.
And what happened to him?
They ruined his reputation. His career was destroyed.
But he didn't do it.
No. They eventually had to clear him, and they paid out a settlement of over $5 million for the harassment.
$5 million.
Yeah.
So the FBI's first theory collapses spectacular.
And it costs the taxpayers millions, so they need a new target.
Right. They have to pivot.
They pivot their focus to Dr. Bruce Ivins.
Okay, who was he?
He was a top-tier biodefense researcher who actually worked at the U.S. military's biodefense labs at Fort Detrick.
Okay, so he actually has the access. The pressure mounts on Ivins.
It does. And then in August 2008, right before a major conference.
Right, the timing is crazy. The FBI announces that Dr. Ivins has committed suicide.
And his method, this is the crucial part.
He allegedly overdosed on paracetamol.
The active ingredient in Tylenol.
This is the exact moment Schöning's A&E training triggers a massive alarm.
A huge red flag. Because, having worked in emergency rooms on 3 different continents, Schöning had intimately dealt with paracetamol overdoses.
He'd seen it firsthand, over and over.
He knew the grim, unglamorous clinical reality of how that drug interacts with the human body in massive doses.
Right, because paracetamol toxicity does not simply put a person to sleep.
Not at all. It's not like the movies. When taken in massive quantities, it completely overwhelms the liver's ability to process it.
It depletes something, right?
Yes, it depletes a crucial antioxidant called glutathione.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it leads to a buildup of a highly toxic byproduct called NAPQI.
What does that do?
This byproduct literally destroys liver cells. It causes acute hepatic necrosis.
So his liver was rotting inside him.
Essentially, yes. It is a slow, agonizing process that takes days.
Days.
Days. It's characterized by severe vomiting, abdominal pain, and eventually multi-organ failure.
That sounds absolutely horrific.
It is. And beyond the physiological horror of it, the statistical probability of it actually working is shockingly low.
Right. Schöning cites a statistic in the interview about this.
He does. He says that out of roughly 100,000 attempts using this method in the U.S. in 2008, only 91 were successful.
91 out of 100,000. That is roughly a 1 in 2,000 success rate.
It's incredibly inefficient. And the FBI is claiming that a man whose entire life's work revolved around the mechanics of fast-acting, incredibly lethal biological agents.
A man who knew exactly how to shut down a human nervous system in minutes.
Right. They are claiming he chose a method with a 99.9% failure rate that takes days to kill you.
Schöning has this incredible analogy for it in the text.
It's a Formula One driver, right?
Yeah. He compares it to a Formula One driver, a master of high-speed precision machines.
Deciding to commit suicide by buying a child's bicycle and trying to pedal it into a brick wall.
It defies all professional logic.
The professional incongruity is staggering. But Schöning points out the circumstantial medical red flags as well.
Because it doesn't end with just the method. What happened in the hospital?
Well, according to his research, Ivins was allegedly unconscious in the hospital for 2 days.
2 whole days.
And during an agonizing, slow liver failure, standard medical protocol would dictate an aggressive intervention.
Like trying to flush his system.
Or potentially even a liver transplant to save the patient.
Especially considering he was a high-profile federal suspect. You'd think they'd want him alive to stand trial.
Exactly. Yet, no transplant was attempted.
Wow.
And when he finally died, no autopsy was performed.
Wait, really? No autopsy on a federal suspect in a massive terror case?
No autopsy to confirm the exact mechanics of his death.
That's a glaring omission.
And the FBI, rather than viewing this suspicious death as a reason to dig deeper into their prime suspect, they just used it as an opportunity to close the book on the anthrax case entirely.
Case closed.
Yeah.
Suspect is dead.
Exactly. And this single medical anomaly becomes the foundation of Schöning's entire worldview.
You just couldn't let it go.
No, he documented his findings in a book called Game Over, Anthrax '01 and COVID-19.
And his conclusion was that the anthrax case was not the work of a lone wolf scientist.
Right. He concludes it was an active, highly orchestrated cover-up by organized criminals operating within or adjacent to the state apparatus.
By identifying what he believes to be a false narrative surrounding Evans' death, Schöning effectively stops looking at the anthrax attacks as an isolated tragedy.
He begins looking at them as a blueprint.
A blueprint for what?
Well, if a group of people possesses the coordination, the access to military-grade pathogens, and the institutional influence to successfully cover up a domestic biological attack using a fake suicide.
They possess a terrifying level of power.
Exactly. Schöning's chess background really kicks in here. He isn't just looking at the pieces on the board anymore.
He is analyzing the player moving them.
Yes.
Okay, I have to pause the narrative right here, because we are about to hit the biggest intellectual leap in the entire interview.
It is a massive leap.
And it requires some serious scrutiny. Schöning claims that because he uncovered the criminal network behind the 2001 anthrax cover-up, he knew their next move.
He claimed he could see the next play on the board.
Right. In a December 2018 interview in Berlin, which, by the way, was broadcast in September 2019, months before the world had ever heard the term COVID-19.
Important timeline to keep in mind.
Very important. He publicly stated that this same group of criminals was planning a worldwide pandemic for the year 2020.
That's a huge claim.
It is. And, I mean, I understand being suspicious of an FBI investigation, but drawing a straight predictive line from a bizarre suicide in 2008 to a global viral pandemic 12 years later.
It seems almost impossible to justify logically.
It really does. How does he bridge that massive gap?
Well, the gap seems insurmountable if you are looking at it through the lens of epidemiology.
Okay.
But Schöning is looking at it through the lens of criminology.
He's shifted paradigms.
He has undergone a complete paradigm shift. He no longer views global health crises as natural phenomena.
So what are they to him?
He views them as instruments of pre-planned crime.
I see.
Think about the biological fear generated by the anthrax letters in 2001. It was highly effective.
The whole country was paralyzed.
And what were the results of that fear? Massive government contracts for biodefense.
All the money.
Exactly. Follow the money, follow the power. There were massive shifts in civil liberties and widespread societal compliance born out of sheer terror.
So in Schöning's framework, this hypothetical criminal syndicate successfully tested this tool on a national scale in 2001.
And they wouldn't simply walk away after a successful test.
They would refine it.
They would refine it and scale it up globally.
So he is arguing that a global pandemic isn't a random zoonotic leap or a lab accident.
No, in his view, it is the deliberate deployment of a tested psychological and biological weapon.
And he specifically predicted in that 2018 interview that the ultimate goal of this 2020 pandemic would be to mandate vaccinations for everybody.
Right. He is tracking a modus operandi.
Explain that.
If the goal of these criminals is massive population-level control and unprecedented financial extraction, what's the best way to get it?
A mandatory global medical intervention.
Like a vaccine. That is the ultimate endgame. The virus itself is almost secondary in his analysis.
It's just the vehicle.
It is merely the vehicle required to manufacture the demand for the mandate.
Wow. And he viewed putting this prediction out in the open, publishing his book and doing the 2018 interview as a form of life insurance.
He figured if he broadcasted their playbook to the world, they wouldn't dare touch him.
Because it would prove he was right. But the reaction he describes in the Lighthouse TV interview was swift and brutal anyway.
Very brutal. He claims his medical contracts were canceled the precise day the 2019 broadcast aired.
The exact day.
The exact day. And beyond his personal career, he states the media platform that hosted him was aggressively targeted.
Which was one of the biggest independent platforms in Europe at the time, right?
It was, and he says it was financially dismantled, forced to rebrand, and the interviewer himself actually had to change his name due to immense intimidation.
So they completely scrubbed him. Now, from an outside perspective, one might view his career derailment as the natural consequence of a medical professional making wild, unsubstantiated claims in public.
A lot of people would see it that way. You can't just yell fire in a crowded theater.
Right. But to a tactician like Schöning,
to a chess player like Schöning, this immediate systemic retaliation serves as profound confirmation.
How so?
In chess, if you move a pawn and your opponent immediately sacrifices a high-value piece just to eliminate it, you know you have threatened a vital part of their strategy.
You've hit a nerve.
Exactly. The aggressive silencing didn't deter him. It proved to him that his assessment of the board was brutally accurate.
Which brings us to 2020. The pandemic he claims to have predicted actually materializes.
It happens. The lockdowns, the fear, the mandates.
And Schöning doesn't hide. He leverages his prior warnings and steps directly into the center of the global pushback against COVID mandates.
He becomes a massive figurehead in the protests.
Yeah, in August 2020, during massive demonstrations in Berlin against lockdown measures, he claims to have spoken to crowds approaching 1 million people.
1 million people, that's a huge crowd.
Massive. But he explicitly points out the severe discrepancy between what he witnessed from the stage and what the media reported.
Ah, yes. He notes that official channels claimed only 20,000 people were in attendance.
That's a crazy difference, 20,000 versus 1 million.
And a visual discrepancy of nearly 1 million people feeds directly into his core thesis regarding institutional deception.
Because if the state apparatus is willing to suppress the scale of public dissent by a factor of 50,
it reinforces the narrative that a coordinated machine is actively managing public perception.
regardless of the exact headcount, the momentum of these protests was undeniably huge.
Undeniable, he was sharing stages with highly visible, polarizing figures like Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
which amplified his platform exponentially.
It did, and it sets the stage for a deeply symbolic and chaotic confrontation.
Yes, on September 26, 2020, in London.
Schöning was invited to speak to an estimated 50,000 people at Trafalgar Square.
Right in the heart of London. And he was joining a roster that included Piers Corbyn and David Icke.
But the event was dismantled before he could even approach the microphone.
What happened?
Police raided the technical tent. They physically pulled the plugs on the sound systems and effectively dispersed the organized rally.
So they shut down the main stage.
But deprived of their stage and their sound system, the crowd adapted.
Right. They marched down Oxford Street and congregated at Hyde Park.
More specifically, they converged on Speaker's Corner.
Now, the choice of location here is steeped in heavy historical irony.
It really is. We need to look at what Speaker's Corner actually represents to understand this.
Right. Since the Parts Regulation Act of 1872, Speaker's Corner has served as the global epicenter of unbridled free speech.
It is the physical embodiment of the democratic ideal.
The idea that any idea, no matter how radical, offensive, or controversial, deserves to be aired in the public square.
It's a very sacred space for free expression.
It is. This is the exact patch of dirt where the suffragettes campaigned for women's right to vote.
It's where George Orwell championed free expression.
And where Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin debated political philosophy.
The unwritten rule of Speaker's Corner is that you can face a hostile crowd, you can be heckled endlessly.
But the state will never silence you.
Exactly. It is a monument to the endurance of dissenting thought.
So Schöning, standing on this monument, prepares to speak to the gathered crowd.
And according to his detailed account, the moment he attempts to exercise this historic right, the state response is overwhelming.
The visual contrast he describes is incredibly stark. I want you to picture a single man in a dark suit and tie, standing on a soapbox in a park.
Very traditional.
And suddenly he is swarmed. He describes a squad of 50 police officers in high-visibility yellow vests and riot helmets collapsing on him.
At Speaker's Corner.
At Speaker's Corner. They don't debate him, they put him in handcuffs immediately, simply for standing there and attempting to articulate his ideas to the crowd.
The machinery of the state doesn't just remove him from the park either. It isolates him completely.
Right, he was transported across London and placed in solitary confinement at Wandsworth Prison.
Wandsworth is a major high-security prison.
And he describes spending 22 hours in a cell.
Denied access to legal counsel.
Denied a phone call to his wife.
Completely cut off from any information regarding the outside world.
And what was the official justification for deploying 50 riot officers and utilizing solitary confinement?
He was officially accused of breaching COVID-19 regulations by speaking to a gathering of more than 30 people.
A gathering of more than 30 people, a bureaucratic infraction that normally carries a 50-pound fine.
A 50-pound fine, yet he is locked in a cell in a major high-security prison.
That's unbelievable. Eventually, though, the external pressure broke through.
Yes, RFK Jr. tweeted a photo demanding his release.
And coordinated protests outside British embassies around the world forced the authorities to finally let him go.
But his description of his time inside that cell reveals a lot about his psychology.
He mentions a quiet interaction with the police, right?
Yes, he claims that during his detainment, 2 police officers quietly apologized to him.
Really? What did they say?
They acknowledged that the excessive force and the detainment were unjust, but they stated they were simply following orders.
Just doing their jobs.
Right. And for Schöning, this interaction perfectly encapsulates the banality of evil concept.
Meaning the foot soldiers aren't the masterminds.
Exactly. The individuals enforcing these draconian measures are not the architects of the conspiracy.
They are just low-level functionaries trapped by economics and hierarchy.
Acting as puppets within a larger machine, it reinforces his belief that the actual enemy is the unseen coordination at the top, not the men in the yellow vests.
And while he was sitting in that cell, he knew exactly how high the stakes were. He specifically references Julian Assange,
Another high-profile figure who is held in a British prison for disseminating information that threatened state narratives.
Schöning knew he could easily disappear into the system, yet he claims he never panicked.
Never. He credits his background as a marathon runner and a competitive rower.
Right, the endurance sports.
He understood how to manage physiological stress, how to endure, and he simply laid down and went to sleep.
He just went to sleep.
His ability to compartmentalize that stress is directly linked to his overarching mental framework.
Because he did not view his arrest as a random stroke of bad luck or a personal defeat.
No, he viewed it as a predictable countermove by an opponent he had successfully provoked.
If you believe you're playing a high-stakes game of chess against a global syndicate, getting arrested at Speaker's Corner isn't a tragedy.
No, it's confirmation that you are winning the intellectual war. You force them to show their hand.
But the game didn't end in 2020. Schöning asserts that this network is currently orchestrating its next maneuver.
He's made another prediction.
Yes. In a new book, released in December 2023 and recently translated into English, he issues a stark warning about the future.
And what does he claim is coming?
He claims the next wave of global disruption will not be a viral pandemic.
Okay.
Instead, he predicts an attack targeting the microbiome, utilizing bacteria.
Okay, to understand the terrifying nature of this prediction, we have to look at the biology of the microbiome.
Let's do that. What is it exactly?
The human microbiome consists of trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, and viruses that primarily reside in our gut.
Right.
We are quite literally more bacteria than we are human cells.
Which is a crazy thought.
It is. And these organisms are not simply passengers. They are fundamentally integrated into our biology.
What do they do?
They regulate our immune system, they synthesize crucial vitamins, they digest our food.
They keep us alive.
Yes, and they produce a massive amount of our neurotransmitters, like serotonin. The microbiome is the foundation of human health.
And Schöning is predicting that the authorities will manufacture a narrative around a new killer bacteria.
A bacterial scare instead of a viral one.
Right. And he argues that this narrative will be utilized to justify new extreme lockdowns.
But more insidiously.
Yes, more insidiously, it will be used to mandate the massive population-wide administration of antibiotics.
Wow. If a government mandates massive doses of broad-spectrum antibiotics for the general population, the biological fallout would be catastrophic.
Why? What would happen?
Well, antibiotics do not discriminate. They carpet bomb the gut. They wipe out the beneficial bacteria along with the harmful ones.
So they destroy the microbiome.
Completely. And by systematically destroying the microbiome, you compromise the immune system of the entire population.
Rendering everyone chronically ill.
Dependent on pharmaceutical interventions and physically weakened. It is a biological scorched earth tactic.
And he doesn't just offer vague warnings. He names specific entities driving this agenda.
Who does he point to?
He points to organizations he labels COP-X and highly visible figures, most notably Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
Yes. He even claims that his latest book includes DVDs featuring direct confirmation of this specific microbiome strategy straight from Gates himself.
That's a very specific claim.
Very. And furthermore, he asserts that this exact same criminal network, having utilized viruses and planning to utilize bacteria, is currently laying the logistical and legislative groundwork to draft citizens into a massive conventional war in Europe.
This represents an escalation of his core thesis.
It's all connected in his mind.
In Schöning's worldview, the specific method of disruption is almost interchangeable.
Right, whether it is a viral pandemic, a bacterial terror campaign, or a conventional land war.
The overarching objective remains exactly the same: the centralization of power, the extraction of wealth, and the absolute control of the population through manufactured crises.
Listening to all of this, it is incredibly dense and, frankly, genuinely terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
We are talking about state-sponsored bioweapons, global syndicates covering up murders, the deliberate destruction of human gut flora, and impending European conflict.
It sounds like the plot of a dystopian sci-fi novel.
It really does. How are the person supposed to process this avalanche of information without completely succumbing to despair?
It is an overwhelming amount of information to process. I mean, it's a very dark worldview.
Yes.
However, if we examine the psychology of Schöning's approach, we actually find a deeply counterintuitive form of comfort.
Comfort. How is any of this comforting?
Well, Schöning operates on the principle that knowledge, no matter how grim, removes fear.
Okay, I see.
He argues that the true danger to human sanity and autonomy is ignorance. Trusting a false narrative and being kept in the dark while invisible forces dictate your life.
Because if you don't understand the rules of the system, you're essentially just a piece on the board being moved around by forces you can't even perceive.
Precisely. By meticulously researching the history, naming the players involved, identifying the logistical patterns, and publicly predicting the next moves.
He reclaims his agency.
He does. He transforms himself from a helpless victim in a chaotic random universe into an active opponent in a structured, albeit ruthless, game.
Mapping the board is his psychological survival mechanism.
Yes.
Wow. Well, this deep dive has covered an immense amount of ground today.
We really have. We traced the path of an A&E doctor relying on empirical triage.
We examined how a single statistical absurdity in a cold case suicide, a bioweapons expert choosing Tylenol, served as the catalyst for a massive global theory.
We explored his 2018 prediction of a global pandemic, his dramatic arrest by 50 riot police at the historic Speaker's Corner,
And his current warnings regarding the systematic destruction of the microbiome and impending war.
And, regardless of your personal assessment regarding the factual validity of his claims, Dr. Schöning's narrative serves as a masterclass in the sheer power of a paradigm shift.
It really does. We often consider how difficult it is to change a firmly held belief.
But this story illustrates that when a person encounters a piece of evidence that shatters their trust in the official narrative on one specific, highly focused issue.
Like the glaring anomalies in the paracetamol suicide.
Exactly. When that trust shatters, the entire dam breaks.
It fundamentally alters the burden of proof. It's like realizing the software on your computer isn't just glitching, it has been intentionally infected with malware.
That's a great analogy.
Once you realize the system is compromised, you can never look at a single line of code the same way again. Every pop-up, every slow load time, every error message is suddenly viewed through the lens of suspicion.
You are forced to reverse engineer everything you see.
That is the exact mechanism of his worldview. He no longer takes any global event at face value.
He analyzes every mandate, every crisis, and every official explanation for the hidden architecture of human coordination beneath it.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, lingering paradox drawn directly from the interview itself.
What's that?
Despite spending hours detailing what he explicitly calls the biggest crime in history, despite surviving solitary confinement, and despite anticipating biological warfare and global conflict, Schöning describes himself as an optimist who is living a happy life.
He projects a profound sense of calm.
He really does.
Yeah.
Which leads to a really fascinating question I want you to consider as we end today. Could it be that believing in a massive, highly organized, and even malevolent global conspiracy is actually more psychologically comforting than accepting the alternative?
Is it easier to believe that someone somewhere is deliberately controlling the F1 driver on the bicycle?
Rather than accepting the terrifying reality that the world is simply chaotic,
Right.
random, and completely out of anyone's control.